Hello and welcome. Can you believe I only used 3 different stitches to create this piece? I'm going to show you how. And at the end, I'm going to show a bonus method that answers the question, what do you do with these when you're finished? I'm going to show how to create these stitches and how to use them in different ways to create various textures and color. I also show a different way to cut out an animal shape. So join me and stitch along. Let's get started. I've placed some small pieces of fabric on a 5x5 piece of felt and basted them down with basting stitches. I've chosen threads that match with the colors in the fabrics, so I'm working with these pinks, a turquoise, and a green. I may add more colors later, but this is a place to start. I'm going to begin by stitching around each little patch of fabric with some straight stitches. I've brought out my set of 6 bird templates. I'm going to choose one of these to place onto my collage. I'm pulling them out and auditioning them. And the truth is, there's a couple that I think would work really well here. One of the things I do is place them on my collage and I flip them over to see if facing them one way looks better than another. I just play with these until I find one that I think I'm going to like to use. And this one's sort of a crow shape. And I'm choosing that one today to use. There are several ways to use these templates. I'm choosing today to use freezer paper. So I've cut a piece of freezer paper and I've put the shiny side down and I'm working on the paper side. I'm using a pencil to trace my template all the way around. I'm hopping over the feet and just doing little marks where the legs are. Then I'm going to take this freezer paper over to my iron and I'm going to iron my fabric onto the shiny side. And if my fabric had a right side and a wrong side, then I would have to decide which orientation I wanted my shape to be so that I made sure that I had it the way I wanted. Now I can take my scissors and I can cut out this piece of fabric. This is really good when you have a thin fabric or a fabric that frays a lot. It makes it a lot easier to cut out when it's adhered to this paper. So I'm working my way around, cutting out with my larger scissors. And when I come to a part that's a little tighter, I'm going to switch to a smaller pair of scissors and cut into those areas. And then when my piece is completely cut out, all I have to do is peel it away from the fabric. One of the things I like about using freezer paper is that it allows you to get some really sharp edges on the shape that you're cutting. You can see here that I haven't cut out my feet, and that's because I'm going to stitch them with embroidery floss later. But I have got the little beginning parts of the legs, the top of the legs where it meets the bird, to give me an idea of where to place the feet. I've chosen a floss color that very closely matches this dark blue of the bird. And I'm going to stitch it on with just a straight stitch all the way around the shape of the bird, so it will also be attached to the piece. And now I'm ready to show the first of my 3 stitches I use in this piece, and that is the blanket stitch. So I start in the back with a knot and I come around and I'm always stitching at the bottom of the stitch towards the top. And if you can see my left hand, I'm holding that thread to the side so that when I come up with my stitch, I'm making a loop each time. So by making that loop, it's catching at the very top there, making that line of the blanket stitch that connects all of the stitches. Going around the corner, it's the same thing. And I can guide a little bit where the stitch lands. And as the thread gets shorter and shorter, it's harder to make that loop. So here I am knotting off in the back, and I can just come back in with a new piece of thread, attach, going through the very top where I ended. So now it's connected again. And I'm using my left hand to hold that thread to the side so that when I come up, I'm making a loop. And that's the blanket stitch. So here I've gone all the way around with this darker color. And now I'm going to use this teal thread to do my next stitch, which is the wandering stitch. Really, it's just a straight stitch or a seed stitch, but I call it the wandering stitch because, as you can see, it helps me to wander across the piece, making marks as I go, without worrying about the stitches being in any particular orientation. I can angle them, I can make them straight, I can make them line up. So it's really the same stitch that I used to attach all of the pieces in the beginning, all of my patchwork pieces. That was a straight stitch. But I think of it as a wandering stitch because of the way that I can build up layers of color, layers of texture. So I've come in with a teal color that's just slightly darker than the one I had used for my first couple of passes. And I'm doing the same thing where I'm wandering across the piece, making stitches of different lengths and different angles, and I'm adding dimension and texture with both the stitch and the secondary color. So here it is, my two different colors and my wandering stitch. And then I'm going to come in and work on the bird. These are just straight stitches again. I'm angling them in the direction of the feathers of the bird. And it allows me to wander across the piece in the direction I want. And the sort of uneven nature of the angle and the length of the stitches just makes everything look more natural. And that leads me to my third stitch that I use in this piece, which is the running stitch, very traditional stitch that is used in slow stitching, where you're moving across the piece, stacking up the stitches, and it's one long stitch that goes in and out. So depending on the thickness of the fabric, I either take one stitch at a time or I can stack up several stitches. So this piece on the bottom that has all the colors is a little bit thicker, so I'm taking one stitch at a time, and where it's thinner, I can stack up my stitches. Now I'm going back and I'm doing the wandering stitch in pink, right above where I had done the teal. I'm doing the same thing where I'm working back and forth, placing stitches, moving in the direction I want. These really are seed stitches. Now I'm going back and doing more running stitch. This time in white, I'm moving across the top of the piece. I'm stacking the stitches where I can. I'm taking single stitches where it's more convenient for me. I do whatever works. And I'm placing running stitches all the way in that top section. So here you can see that I have done a combination of running stitches and wandering stitches. You can also do running stitches in the other direction, going over top of stitches that you've already made, and that makes little plus signs. So here you can see I've added more blanket stitch on the edge. If I place them closer together, it makes a more solid color. If I place them farther apart, it makes more of a singular mark. The same with the wandering stitches. If I place them closer together, they make more of a bold mark. If I spread them out, then the effect is different. I've added more running stitches in this orange color across the piece. I've added wandering stitches close together in orange. And you can see all the different effects that you get with just these 3 stitches. I'm going to turn the piece around so you can have a look at the back. Sometimes that's interesting in its own way to see what it looks like in the reverse. And now, as a bonus, the answer to the question of what do I do with this piece? I'm going to attach this piece to canvas. So I have a 5x5 canvas that I've painted black. It's actually a blue-black, so it goes really well with the color of my bird. And I'm using a matte gel medium and a paintbrush. And I'm going to spread the gel medium on the canvas. I'm going to avoid the edges where some of the black will show, although this does dry clear, so I'm not too worried about it. Then I'm going to flip my piece over and add some gel medium right around the edges of the piece. And that will help me to attach the edges. And I'm going to put a little bit in the middle, very lightly, and I'm not worried about it soaking in because I'm using such a light coating. Then I'm going to put it onto my canvas. I'm going to press it down. I'm going to pay special attention to the edges to attach them. Then I'm going to have a look at the edges and see if there's any spots where it's rippled up, where it hasn't completely adhered, and come back in with my brush and add a little bit more of that gel medium in those spots. There's really only 2 spots that I can see where I want a little bit more glue. So I put that on, and now I'm going to make sure my surface is clean. I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to place a heavy book on it, and I'm going to let it dry overnight. So now it's dry, and here it is. It's completely adhered to this canvas. All that's left to do is for me to sign the back. So I'm going to do that now. I'm calling this piece Blue Crow. So here it is. 3 simple stitches used to create all this texture. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm putting this crow in the shop so it can find a new home. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, happy stitching.